There are various ways for a business to open the global marketplace. One of the things that they can do is have a successful business in their home country and then send products or services to buyers in other countries. So by shipping to other countries through different mail services, you can send packages to other countries and do that. Next is to establish global operations. So having manufacturing plants or service operations in other country as a way to cut costs. So when we say as a way to cut costs, this is because labor in the United States is more expensive than labor in some other countries. Some countries are actually more expensive labor than the United States. Germany, for example, has the highest union representation of any country in the world, and they have higher salaries than the US manufacturing plants do. Then you can also develop global supply chains. Purchasing raw materials, components, supplies from sellers in other countries. You can subcontract work. Subcontracting work is extremely popular also. Companies like Nike, Adidas, Walmart, many fashion designers, fashion retail companies do subcontracting. They do not own factories anywhere, but they work with a variety of factories in different countries that work on their products. Those factories then will subcontract with a variety of different countries. For example, when we talk about the fashion industry as a whole, one of the things that we're going to look at is a tragedy that happened in a manufacturing factory for clothing. Well, at the time, they were making clothes for Walmart, Kmart, Gap, and 3 or 4 other locations. So often it's subcontracting because these companies don't actually own factories. They just contract out the work to various factories. Okay, this is an example of the location of some various businesses. So we had some of those businesses were listed on the previous slide as having higher gross domestic product than some countries. You can see that a lot of the companies that you are very popular that you might think about are international companies. For example, Toyota's headquarters is in Japan. They are based in Japan. They do manufacture some models in the United States, but their main headquarters is in Japan. Volkswagen is based in Germany. Okay, so they've always been in Germany. They also produce some of their models in the United States. I believe their factories are in Tennessee, but their base headquarters. Okay, Shell and BP are both British companies doing oil. We have Anheuser-Busch InBev. Anheuser-Busch, of course, doing Busch Light. They also own Budweiser, Bud Light. You can see that they're an international company. And then Chevron is a U.S.-based company. Okay, multinational companies operate on a global scale. Okay, they have locations all over the world in multiple different locations, and it's just their home office that is in a certain area. Okay, as we saw, some firms are so large they generate higher revenues than the entire gross domestic product of some countries. Okay. Because of size, financial power, multinational corporations are subject to a lot of ethical debate. One is transferring manufacturing to countries where rates are lower. So first, manufacturing was first transferred to Japan in the 70s. So that was where we went for low-cost manufacturing. Then we started going to China, Vietnam, Korea, and other countries. Now manufacturing plants are starting to move to Mexico because the countries that they've been in for the last 20 years are starting to demand higher wages. Other things, technology such as robotic manufacturing, robotic equipment using robots in warehouses. So these labor-saving devices reduce the amount of people that they need on staff. Okay. They can exploit natural and human resources. I already gave an example of Nestle using public water, using water from streams and stuff, doing contracts with states to have access to water to bottle it for sale. And then oftentimes, and you can look up how many times has Nestle been sued, who are they currently being sued by, and you'll see that they've been sued by the state of Michigan, they've been sued by the state of California, and it's for taking more water than they agreed to take, so natural resources. Also human resources. Taking advantage of sweatshop labor, for example. Taking advantage of child labor, which is still a very large problem in some countries and in some manufacturing plants, especially in certain industries. Especially chocolate industry and fashion industry have some of the highest problems with both child labor and slave labor. So slave labor still occurs also. Okay, exploiting the labor markets of host countries and creating unfair competition. It is difficult to compete with, as I said, places like Walmart. They are so big and they have so much money and they have pull with regulations and stuff. Amazon, okay? How do you compete with Amazon? Amazon very recently in the last 2 years built a warehouse in Cedar Falls. They were Cedar Falls tried to attract them. Cedar Falls sold them the land for the warehouse for $1 and gave them 5 years of no taxes. So they were given the property for $1. They have years of no taxes, and the reasoning is they bring commerce into the economy. They bring jobs. They build this warehouse in Cedar Falls, and eventually, when they do start paying property taxes on that warehouse, it will generate great income for the city. Okay, it's not uncommon for states to give incentives to bring businesses to the states, such as being tax-free for 5 years or having free land or different things like this. That's an unfair competition because if I'm giving Amazon free land, any of their small individually owned sole proprietorship competitors don't get that same incentive. Okay, another way that we can invest is called foreign direct investment. Okay, and so this is where we invest or buy shares of stock or loan money in a foreign company. So we have in 2019, foreign direct investment was $1.5 trillion. There are some countries in which you are not allowed to do business unless you are investing in that country in some way, shape, or form. And so for American companies that want to do business in those countries, they have to invest or be involved in a foreign firm. There are also some countries that do not allow foreign nationals to own property. So if the United States, a company from the U.S. wanted to build a business in that country, they would not be allowed to own an actual building. In that case, they would need to collaborate with someone in that foreign country that already owned property, paying them access or different things like that. Okay, human migration. People move. Okay, people move all over the place. Okay, migration continues despite anti-immigrant policies. The United States is not the only place in the world that has anti-immigrant beliefs or policies, or even travel bans. We have 3.5% of the world's population living in countries other than where they were born. And we have immigrants being an important part of the workforce. Okay, that's true in a lot of various places. For one, we have certain skill sets that are lacking just from college education, or we have more jobs open in certain types than we have people to fill them. In those situations, pulling people in from other countries is the only way we can fill them. This can be true in engineering jobs, medical jobs, doctors, as well as workers in farms. Okay, so there's a wide variety of people that work in different things. I was in Germany this summer with a group, and they talked about the mass amount of homelessness where we were in Germany. And this is actually because of migration. So Germany has had millions of displaced migrants in the last couple of years. They have several 100,000 people from the Ukraine. They have people coming from Iran and Iraq and other war-torn countries. And so they've had a lot of people come into their country that weren't there before because they are asylum seekers from war-torn countries. So there was a lot of homelessness, because when you suddenly bring 100,000 new people into a city that have fled a country that has just been bombed, there's not enough housing for them. And so there were people all over the place. So that was something that we had encountered just this last May term. Okay. International commerce happens with the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and the International Monetary Fund. Okay, the World Trade Organization sets the rules of international trade. Okay, these banks also do business loans. They help with infrastructure, but they help set the rules and regulations that enact international trade. Okay, they're not the only groups that set international regulations. We also have governments that set regulations. Okay, but if you don't realize, even in the United States, the financial industry and the government are two separate entities. So the Federal Reserve and the Federal Bank are actually a standalone entity beside the government, and they are not controlled directly by the government. It was set up this way as kind of a checks and balances thing to kind of control governmental influence on financial measures, and so they really are independent. These bank systems here, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Trade Organization, are also independent organizations trying to facilitate trade and monetary flow between nations. Okay, so we have the World Bank, established in 1944, provides loans to member nations. The funds are mostly used for infrastructure. They can also be used for education, especially when we're talking about a developing country. They might not have schools in their areas. They might not have a local school, but the closest school is very far away. in some rural areas. Another thing for infrastructure, water access is also a very large infrastructure issue in some areas of the world where water isn't easily located or isn't close by. Okay. We'll finish up these banks here. So the International Monetary Fund is a sister organization to the World Bank. They were created at the exact same time. Its purpose is to manage currency exchange and international payments. Okay, so every country has its own currency, and those currencies all operate at different rates. So what the International Monetary Fund hopes to do is try to stabilize this currency exchange to make them non-volatile. You know, sometimes a currency exchange rate can change every single day. And so the goal is to try to make it so it's much easier to exchange money without having massive currency exchanges. You know, you can look at the rates. Right now, I was just looking at the rate of $1 to a euro the other day. It was about $1 US to 1.08 euros. And then last week when I looked, it had gone up 10 cents and it was $1 US to 1.18 euro. Okay. And then the World Trade Organization, which was founded in 1995. Before it was a general agreement on tariffs and trade. One of the aims is to promote free trade. Okay. It tries to negotiate and eliminate barriers to trade, such as duties and tariffs. As we know, tariffs are extra taxes put on the value of goods and services that are moving into a country. Okay, there's a lot of controversy around globalization. Okay, a lot of, should some businesses be allowed to go into other countries? Should we be allowed to exploit low wages? The fact that factories in Asian countries pay $2 an hour to their workers, should that be something that American manufacturers should be able to exploit? Is it fair for us to use child labor in countries where there are no laws against child labor? There's both sides of the debate. Or also, if a major corporation comes into a developing country, are they helping that developing country advance their economy? You can go back and forth. Some corporations help build water wells so those communities have clean water. They build schools so they have infrastructure. They build roads so they can access their businesses, and those roads also benefit the community. So there's debates on both sides about whether it's good or not, and I'm not necessarily sure that that's a question that can be completely answered. Is globalization really wonderful, or is it not? I don't think that can be answered as a yes or no question. Okay, we'll continue in the next video.